What's up guys, it's the NJB here, and today I'm doing a video on Static Shock in 2017. So I rewatched the entire series of Static Shock, and it took me maybe just over a week or maybe just under around that time. And I basically did this to kind of refresh my memories of the show, because I really loved it when I was much younger. The show aired before I was even in middle school, so I was really young, and I don't remember a lot of the episodes, so I decided to rewatch it just to relive that childhood moments, to get a lot of nostalgia, and basically to see if I still like the show. Because me being an adult now versus when I was a child, a lot has changed, and a lot of what I like in TV shows has changed. So I really wanted to know, is it still as good as I remember it, or is it just all childhood stuff that was in my head? So before I get into my opinions on the show and if I like it as much as I did when I was a child, let me kind of break down the TV series Static Shock for you guys who probably didn't watch the show, or for you guys who probably didn't see the whole thing. And of course for you guys who probably haven't watched the show since it ended in 2004. So let's get right into the background. So the TV show Static Shock premiered on September 23rd, 2000, in the year 2000, and it had about 52 episodes. The last episode aired on May 22nd, 2004. So the show did last for about 4 years, and it aired on the Kids WBU network. The main character is Virgil Hawkins. So he's a 14-year-old in high school, and in the beginning of the show, he is getting bullied by another character named Francis. So Francis is kind of a bully, and we do kind of see a bit later on that he's kind of involved with a gang. So I believe he might have also been kind of like the head of a gang, but it's not too clear in the show, but he is kind of telling some guys what to do in the first episode where we do see that. So Virgil is getting kind of bullied by Francis after he's defending one of his friends, which is a girl, after Francis is trying to hit on her. So Francis kind of attacks Virgil. He throws him against some lockers, and then Virgil is defended by Wade, who is another student at a high school who's much older by his looks and probably around his junior or senior year in high school. So after a few more problems with Francis, Wade decides to tell Virgil he has to meet him under the bridge later that day to solve his Francis problem. Wade basically tries to convince Virgil to join his gang, which Virgil is extremely against, seeing his mother was killed by gang violence, and Wade tells Virgil to meet him by the docks later that night. So basically what's happening at the docks is that there's going to be a major gang showdown. All the gangs in the city are going to be there, and they're all going to have a fight. So Wade wanted Virgil to be a part of it, especially because he wants him to join his gang. He hands Virgil something covered in cloth, and while they walk away, Virgil sees that it is a gun, and he really does not like guns, and that's kind of important to remember throughout the series. So he throws it into a nearby river, and he notices that the fight has already started by the time he does this. So while he's trying to avoid getting into a fight, he does bump into F-Stop, who is there. So F-Stop realizes it's Virgil, and while he knocks someone down, he turns and walks over to Virgil to presumably start fighting him. But that's when the cops show up, and they bring helicopters and order all the gang members to stand down. Of course, being gang members, they did not listen, and all of them scrambled and ran in all different directions, including Virgil. So while the police are using gas to try and stop the gang members, one of the canisters holding gas blows up a container nearby at the docks, and it triggers lots of explosions around the docks, and it explodes these containers, and all of them are containing the same purple gas. This gas affects all the gang members and changes them into metahumans. This is called the Big Bang. So all the gang members and anyone who was affected by this gas who became a metahuman because of this gas is called a Bang Baby. And that term is also good to remember because it is used throughout the show, and it's good to note. So while Virgil is trying to climb over the fence to get away, he does choke on the gas and he falls back down. So the next scene after that, we do see Virgil in his room, and he is experiencing his powers. The show does not explain how he got to his room. They don't say if the cops brought him there, they don't say if someone else brought him there, or if maybe his dad found out, but the show doesn't explain it. All we know is that he's in his room, and he is having some static problems. Different things are happening. His blanket sticks to him, his razor turns on, or his dad's razor turns on its own without being plugged in, and his light turns on without him flipping the switch, and it is off. So after showing his friend his new powers, his friend says that he could be a superhero, so they do go back to his house to pick out some clothes that he can use for a superhero suit. He picks out the right uniform, and he decides that's going to be his superhero suit, and that is how he becomes Static Shock. So, to answer the question, is Static Shock as good as I remember it? Is it better? Is it worse? And in my opinion, it is better than I remember it. I really love the show, and I still love it as much as I did when I was younger. I mean, I don't know. I just love superhero cartoons, and I think Static Shock is probably one of the best that I've ever watched, like in anything. It has to be one of my favorite shows, and part of me feels like the reason I like it a lot is because of the nostalgia I get from watching it. Like I remember like a lot of the stuff that's happening in the episodes. I remember all the stuff about Ebon. I remember like every problem he had with like Hot Streak, and just a lot of the other characters. And I just really like how the story kind of weaves in like other characters as well. There are episodes where he's working with Batman that happens on multiple occasions. There are episodes where he's working with Superman that happens probably just once. I guess it was just one episode. And there's an episode where he's working with a Green Lantern to fight Sinestro. So they bring in another superhero and another villain from that superhero who's basically from another like world, and it makes Static have to fight him. So I just really like it when the shows do stuff like that because it just makes you know that there's more to it than like just Dakota, and that's where it takes place. I'm not sure which part of Dakota, like if it's north, south, or which one, but I know it takes place there, and it just lets you know that there's more to Static than just what's happening in his city. Like there's still a whole other world. And with all the other DC characters, he does work with the Justice League quite a few times. And that is when he had to deal with Brainiac, who did take control of his friend Richie. And just all those different kind of like storylines and different like plots and all of that, like all into one show is just like really cool to watch. And I really feel like a lot of the TV shows now, not just superhero ones, like just any of them, even like some of like the real life superhero shows, I feel like they can learn a lot just from like watching some of these old DC cartoons. Because in my opinion, some of these cartoons have better like plots and stories than some real life like TV shows. Sometimes the plot makes more sense. And I'm looking at you, Arrow and Flash. I mean, I really like those shows, but I feel like sometimes they go a little bit crazy, but I still watch them. But that's beyond the point. Static Shock is just such a good show to watch, and if you're older and you haven't watched it in a while, or if you like DC comics and you haven't watched like a superhero show, like a DC superhero show, I'd advise you to go back and watch Static Shock. It's so good. It is a child show, but it just doesn't feel that cringy. I mean, if you watch like some older shows, like let's say like if you watch Power Rangers, you probably couldn't watch the whole thing because there's just it's way too childish, and you can hardly sit through a whole episode without wanting to click off. But if you watch Static Shock, I guarantee you'll love it. It's just so like, I guess the show's just perfect to me. I mean, I really can't think of like any real problem with the show. One thing I did notice that while watching some older shows is that I'm starting to realize that a lot of these kid shows are kind of repetitive. I mean, they start off with a hero, they experience a problem, they go back to their place, they figure out how to solve the problem, then the episode ends with them solving it, and everything goes back to normal. But that's kind of the same with like all shows, I guess. But it is kind of different nowadays with like some TV shows, how like sometimes the plot will extend a little more. So that is one like kind of thing I noticed about it. But that's the same for all shows, and it doesn't really like stop the enjoyment of the show at all. Another thing I really like about this show is that it kind of makes you feel like a kid again, and I realized that I think that's one thing that kind of sets it apart from other shows. That a lot of DC shows, I know they had Teen Titans, but a lot of them, they kind of focus on the adult characters, like the Justice League, that kind of did that. And while you still love that show, you kind of see them as adults. Like they're not learning how to do, or like how to use their powers or adjusting to their new superhero lives. Like they're kind of already like into it and they already know what to do. With Static Shock, you kind of imagine yourself like just as a kid in high school and you just get powers. And when he's working with the Justice League, you kind of see how he just enjoys that, and you kind of feel like if you were there, you'd probably be doing or saying the same things that he would, because he's a little kid. He has superpowers, and now he all of a sudden gets to meet the Justice League. He gets to meet Batman and Superman. And if they were real characters, I know like anyone would be like really happy to meet them if they were like a good guy, of course, and like really enjoyed like just hearing about them on the news and stuff. So it's really cool just to see that. It's also cool to see how he deals with his problems. One thing I do know about the show is that they did make him kind of like a nerd, like not so much, but he is like smarter than an average kid. So he does know how to use his electrical powers like way more than like an average person would know. And there are a lot of times in the show where I'm kind of wondering like, is that really possible? I mean, that's kind of interesting, like just to really know like if you can do this with electricity. One thing that I did find kind of like odd in the show is that they actually had him break the fourth wall, and he does this in 2 episodes. So the first one is kind of to bring awareness to guns and that they are dangerous and you should never bring a gun to school. Because in the episode, a kid is getting bullied and he feels like using a gun to stop the bully is the final solution. And another episode, they are talking about dyslexia. One of Static's friends, Rubber Band Man, he has dyslexia and he's a rapper. So they see that he has a lot of letters, like fan mail, that he doesn't open and he's just like straight up throws away. And they realize this is that like he has dyslexia and he can't actually read the fan mail. So he doesn't even bother trying. So this came as a shock because I feel like there were some times in the series where like I feel like he did have to read. It didn't really like get into that, but I feel like he did have to read, and they never talked about that because he was brought in like in the very beginning of the series. I mean, like in probably like I don't know, like first 5 episodes, and we never heard like anything about that. And they only bring up his dyslexia like in the final season, so that's interesting. But overall, those are the times he breaks the fourth wall. So overall, this show is basically perfect to me, and it's really a lovely show to watch. I mean, it does everything you want a superhero show to do. It's lots of action, it makes you connect with the characters, and it just makes, like the plot makes sense. I mean, I just can't think of anything really wrong with it. And it does a lot of connecting to the real world. So if you guys have time on your hands and you guys haven't watched Static Shock, then I'd advise you to go and watch it. It's a really good show to watch. It's really nice, and it's a really good like DC show, superhero show if you're into that stuff. And if you haven't watched it since it's ended, or if it's like a childhood show that you used to watch, then you should go back and check it out again because this show is so good. It's gonna bring back nostalgia. It's gonna make you feel like you're, I don't know, like 6, 7, 5 maybe, like around that age. You're gonna feel like really young, and you're just gonna love the show completely and remember like how good it was, because it is really good and it's probably better than you remember it to be. And also, if you're watching it online on some websites, then during the end of the episodes, you're gonna see like promos for like some other shows that you used to watch. So it's just gonna bring back a whole lot of memory and nostalgia from like just way back then. So to reiterate, the show is just as good as I remember it, and I'd advise you guys to go watch it. In 2017, the show is still fantastic and it's a great show to watch. And personally, I'd probably give it like probably a 10 out of 10 if I were to rate it. So that's that. It's kind of surprising that IMDb gave it like a 7, like somewhere in the range of 7, between 7 and 8 out of 10. So I don't know what these guys are doing, but that's gonna do it for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. I just wanted to kind of talk about Static Shock because recently I've been kind of going back and watching some old shows that I used to watch when I was younger, and I'm trying to see like if I still like them, if I can still watch them, or if they seem too childish or too cringy to me. So Static Shock doesn't feel like that childish or cringy to me. I feel like it's good for anyone, like no matter your age. So yeah. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. This has been the NJB. This has kind of been a different like type of video that I've done. I've never done this before, but yeah. So I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers, mates.